Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 2nd of May, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson. Now, later in the programme, we're going to be covering weather modification, Yemen, and more government snooping on our private lives. But we're going to kick off with the local election results because Nigel Farage's Reform Party has done very well so far in the elections. At least as where there are local elections taking place at all. So these figures will be slightly out of date now because these numbers are changing as we speak. But the Labour vote has declined quite a bit. But it's the Tory party which has been absolutely decimated. So 121 new seats for Reform in the local councils, 96 down the last time when we created these figures for the Tory party. Lib Dems have gained 12 seats, Labour are down 30, Independents are down 9 seats, and Greens are up 2. So that's the situation there. But Reform also won the Runcorn by-election. And so has another MP. Starmer called this a disappointing result, but he declared further and faster change as a result. And that's kind of hilarious because there's been zero policy change under Labour compared with the Tory policy agenda that we saw over the last number of years. Now, we have to remember that several parts of the country didn't hold any form of local election at all this year because of the constitutional vandalism which is taking place in this country. And this, but when I say that, I'm talking about it's the result of the English devolution white paper, which the British regime claims, quotes, sets out how the government plans to deliver on our manifesto pledge to transfer power out of Westminster through devolution and fix foundations of local government. But in reality, this is about transferring power into the hands of the Uber mayors like Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham, who, as we know, are rapidly pursuing a net zero agenda amongst other globalist policies. And the argument for cancelling democracy in these areas is that there was no point holding an election when the authority that the election was for might be gone in a matter of a year or so, as they are transferred or recreated, remorphed into these unitary authorities and so on. So the counties where no elections were held were Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Thurrock, East Sussex, West Sussex, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Surrey. And for its part, by the way, Plymouth held no election this year, but that was for a different reason because councillors in Plymouth are elected in thirds each year. So a third there's an election for a third of them each year, but it's for a 4-year term. And so every 4th year, there's no election as a result. But Plymouth is going to hold a referendum in July this year for an elected mayor. So, Mark, I don't know if you've got any comments on this, but this is a complete constitutional reform in this country. The role of the so-called elected mayors, and they're effectively dictators, as we've seen in London and Manchester, is something that you've been talking about for a long time because of this whole globalist policy over mayors. What are your thoughts?
Good morning, guys. Good morning from Tech. This localizes globalism. They themselves have called it glocalism. And so by putting people that represent the globalist ideology in local offices, elections become superfluous because their whole ideology and philosophy looks well beyond the normal city municipal responsibilities and tries to embrace a global or worldwide consolidation perspective from the local level. So elections become passé, an anachronism to them. That's my initial thought.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks for that. Now, in fact, if you want to get some more background to this, have a look at the UK Column website. And if you just type in the search box elected mayor, there's a whole bunch of articles and news reports that we've been covering this for many years. Do have a look at that to get the background. But in the meantime, then the attack on jury trials, if we're talking about constitutional vandalism, the attack on jury trials continues. A year or so ago, the Times, which we must remember is a newspaper, set up what they call the Times. Oh, sorry, I do apologize. I've missed that one. Just bring that off. Yeah, thanks. The Times Commission on Justice and Courts. This was with a view to setting policy in the UK And I've got to ask, is this the role of a newspaper to set policy in the UK? Anyway, they said it was set up to consider the future of policing and criminal justice system in the light of the knife crime crisis, a shoplifting epidemic, and growing threat of cybercrime, and concerns about the culture of the police. They also were talking about court backlogs and problems with legal aid and overflowing prisons. And now they published their final report a week or so ago, and they recommended a further reduction in jury trials in the UK, with cases instead being heard in what's being described as intermediate courts, with a judge sitting and alongside two magistrates. Now, crimes heard in these courts would include things like theft, drug possession, dangerous driving, fraud, and some forms of what they describe as non-serious assault. I'm not sure whether there is a non-serious assault, but anyway, the proposals are being backed by the government, along with 5 former Lord Chancellors and 2 former Lord Chief Justices. So here is Sarah Sackman, who's the Minister of State for Courts and Legal Services, saying, I think when former senior members of the judiciary, former Lord Chancellors, the Times, victims groups are clamouring for bold and radical changes, including an intermediate court, I think it's an idea whose time has probably come. She went on to say that the government would wait for Sir Brian Levison's recommendations. Brian Levison is looking into courts reform at all, and a very key part of that is the removal of the jury trial. And of course, that is important because juries have the right to annul bad legislation in certain circumstances. This is something that juries aren't generally told, but it is a dangerous thing and a major trampling of our rights to see the option of a jury removed from anybody. And we've got to remember, we're supposedly innocent until proven guilty in this country. But anyway, let's move on. Patrick, let's go to international affairs. And what's Israel been up to?
Well, we looked in our news feeds this morning, and we found this incredible story here. We'll bring this up on screen. Israel attacks a ship, an aid convoy, that was heading for Gaza. It was carrying 30 activists and crew combined, and this was attacked by drones. So the ship was bombed. And the group in question here on board, they're blaming Israel and one of its allies. No casualties have been reported here, and just a quick update on that. According to Al Jazeera, as per 1 hour before this program, all on board the Gaza aid flotilla are confirmed to be safe, according to the Maltese government there. So they had some issues in terms of rescuing them, some problems with that operation as well. But this raises a lot of disturbing questions. And we'll go to the Twitter account here for the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, and they're just giving a description of what happened this morning here. Our vessel is 17 kilometers off the shores of Malta right now in international waters, and they have been subjected to a drone attack twice, says Yasmin Akar, adding that the generators at the front of the vessel were the apparent target. That's the accusation by the group there, and this has been validated by a number of mainstream reports right before it came on air. I might note as well, on board, this is interesting, on board is likely U.S. Army Colonel veteran Mary Ann Wright, who is a big anti-war activist in the United States. She spoke at the Stop the War rallies, the big rallies there, and also Greta Thunberg may be on board this ship as well as a few other people that we have talked to and interviewed. We don't have confirmation as to who's exact. The main point here, Mike, is that they had to leave from Italy because Turkey wouldn't allow. This is Erdogan, the great I'm champion of the Palestinian cause, will not allow any aid flotilla to depart from Turkey. Neither will Egypt, apparently. Neither will Greece nor Cyprus. So the closest country they could launch an aid flotilla for Gaza is Italy. Now, this could spark an international incident if Giorgia Meloni decides to rev up her temper, which is notorious, if she takes an interest in this story. We've got some audio from this as well. We'll go ahead and roll this video real quick so you can hear some of the sounds from this morning.
Yes, if you can assist, please assist, okay.
That just gives you some idea. The last scene there was from the control deck of where the captain sits, all the different video monitors there.
Let me ask you a question. Later on, we're going to be talking about Yemen and John Healy's comments in the House of Commons. And one of the things that we're not going to mention during that report is his complaints about the so-called Houthis attacking vessels in international waters with drones. How much criticism has there been from the likes of the British government, the United States government, European governments at Israel carrying out this attack?
There will be no comment on this by anybody, I predict, nor any mainstream media or any of the concerned publications for public welfare like the Times and others. I don't think this won't even register. Maybe if all 30 people drowned and died somehow and were like eaten by sharks and someone caught it on a cell phone, maybe then the Guardian and the Times might report on this story. So the BBC, of course, but we're still holding our breath. Maybe the Guardian, it might get a mention in the Guardian, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yes. Okay. Well, in the meantime, in the United States, what's going on with national security?
Well, this is the drama of the week, and this ties into a lot of interesting stories. So let's just look at the latest here. Mike Waltz, Donald Trump's national security advisor, was basically fired last night. And so he's been shuffled in the great UK tradition of cabinet reshuffling. He will now be the UN ambassador for the United States because Trump's other pick had to go back to her congressional seat because they're afraid they were going to lose it to a Democrat. So Elise Stefanik, an arch Zionist, absolutely chosen by Miriam Adelson for that UN ambassadorial position. So they had to find someone who's equally as rabid Israel supporter, and Mike Waltz, of course, fits the bill. So he shifts into there. Why was he fired? He's basically taking the brunt for the Signalgate scandal,
right,
for starters. But I think there's a lot more. There's probably a few deeper aspects to this, which we won't find out now. He's been replaced by Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio is now simultaneously the Secretary of State and Donald Trump's chief national security advisor. Not that Mike Waltz was doing anything anyway. So I don't know how important that job is in the Trump administration when you really drill down to it. The next appointee will be Donald Trump's sixth national security advisor, following Michael Flynn, H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, Robert O'Brien, and Mike Waltz. So Donald Trump's been through quite a few of them. So it's a job with a high attrition rate. Let's just put it that way. But why is this interesting? Here's where it gets really interesting. What else is going on in the world? A lot's going on in the world right now. So here's Lindsey Graham. So imagine, we'll talk about the negotiations, but him and other Republicans are front running this new backbone crushing sanctions program. And Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana is saying he's going to turn Russian economy into fish food, whatever that means. But anyway, here's Lindsey Graham. And obviously there's a lot of questions. I mean, not around Lindsey Graham, of course, but around this type of policy here. Why on earth is Donald Trump sending envoys to Moscow, and then Republicans are putting these types of maximum pressure policies to force down? It doesn't make any sense, but neither does this. Trump says any country that buys oil with Iran will not be allowed to do any business with the U.S. Again, high-level negotiations, trying to get a peace deal. So let's look at this. So Trump is, who knows what's going on here, and this has to be from the White House. So Steve Witkoff is the special envoy, getting a lot of headlines. What sort of negotiations is he doing with the Iranians and also in Moscow? There he is with Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the U.S. government is attacking both of those countries with more sanctions and more threats. And we'll single out Iran because we'll get to that in a moment with Pete Hegseth, the embattled defense secretary in the United States. So what exactly is going on here? It's really difficult to tell. It is really difficult to tell. So meanwhile, to make matters even worse on the Russian front, as you know, this is the 80th anniversary of Victory Day for World War II. It's 1945 to 2025. The 80th anniversary. This is a big deal in Russia. Okay, this is probably on the national holiday calendar after Christmas and Easter. It's probably number 3. Okay, in Russia. So you can imagine, why on earth then does Donald Trump tweet this last night? Let's look at this. Donald Trump on X. Here he is. Who knows? Many of our allies and friends are celebrating May 8th as Victory Day, but we did more than any other country by far in producing a victorious result on World War II. I am hereby renaming May 8th as Victory Day for World War II and November 11th as Victory Day for World War I, says Donald Trump. We won. He said, we won. The United States, we won both wars. I'm sorry, it's almost a slip. He should have said, I won both wars. But anyway, we won both wars, says Trump. Nobody was even close in terms of strength, bravery, and military brilliance, but we never celebrate anything. He's saying we don't get the credit, he says. That's because we don't have any leaders anymore, not leaders like me, says Trump. And that, so what is he saying? Anymore that know how to do so. We are going to start celebrating our victories again. I mean, is this the United States or is this North Korea? It's really hard to tell. There's so much performative politics here. But, we could do a whole show on and relitigate history for Donald Trump for his benefit. But I'll just put one or two useful statistics up on screen here. And here's one of them. We'll bring this up on screen. This is the fraction of a country's population that died in World War II. Who's at the top of the list? It's Belarus, okay? Huge percentage of their population. I think 25%, 1 out of 4 Belarusians died at the hands of the Nazis in World War II. Then it's Poland, then Ukraine, then the USSR, then Latvia, Lithuania, and so forth. And look at the bottom. Who's right down there at the bottom? It's the United States, right at the bottom. So in terms of human sacrifice at the altar of victory in World War II and the price incurred by countries, the United States isn't even in the running in that sense. If you want a visual map of this, obviously there's a lot of different sources for this, but in terms of total losses, troops and civilians, the Russian losses are estimated between 25 and 27 million. That's compared to the 400,000 plus from the United States, who arguably entered the war very late indeed. And so here, this is open source aggregate data, which is available on Wikipedia. And again, you can see the totals there. Soviet Union's right up at the top, Poland and so forth, Yugoslavia and France and so forth. The United States isn't really one of the top countries. They're not even really in comparison to the Soviet Union. So, and another history lesson, we talk a lot about, D-Day and Normandy. You have to remind people that by the time the Americans arrived on the beaches in Normandy, the Russians were already in Germany and on their way to Berlin in 1944. But arguably, it was the Eastern Front that broke the back of the Wehrmacht. We're talking about the Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle of Kursk, and of course, the big one, Operation Bagration, June 22nd, just three weeks after the commencement of Operation Overlord, or the D-Day landings. This was one of the biggest military operations ever in the history of warfare. And arguably, if you look at what was in play here, there's nothing even close in World War II. So again, having to litigate this history lesson with a U.S. president that looks like he is completely delusional, and I'm being very kind there, and doing it at a time when you're negotiating while Russia's preparing for Victory Day, I can't imagine a bigger implicit insult to the Russians than what Donald Trump is attempting to do there.
So do you think this Lindsey Graham and whatnot heading over to Russia, this is something that's happening absolutely independent of Trump? It's a Republican effort and he has no say in it, or does he even have any knowledge of their plans to do this? Or are they directly attempting to undermine his efforts, or is there some kind of U.S. good cop, bad cop thing going on here?
There could be a good cop, bad cop, but definitely Trump's team is split on the issue of Ukraine. They're definitely split on Iran. It appears that way anyway. So the Republican Party is not in lockstep with Donald Trump, even though he has the commanding heights of the GOP. So there are some differences in interest, and certainly people like Lindsey Graham and who he represents, they want to see the war go as long as possible. And so Donald Trump is really a sort of obstacle to what they want, which is, these Americans are so crass, they're quite happy to watch Europe tear itself to pieces and then just waltz in at the last moment and provide lots of money for reconstruction and, take credit for winning. I mean, we've already made our case here. So, and again, I'll say this very briefly, Mike, because this is an important point. This is the danger with the United States backing out of NATO. While NATO is a malignant force in its expansionist ways, okay, but it works when there's a pragmatic, responsible, compassionate U.S. leader in power. But with Biden, and it became completely, malignant. But if Trump pulls out of NATO, then there's a power vacuum. Who's going to fill that power vacuum? Britain or Estonia or radical elements of Germany? And then the U.S. could get pulled back into Europe because a European party did what they've done. What they normally do is petty tribal and ethnic rivalries in Europe or economic subterfuge by certain countries pulls the United States back into a bigger war in Europe. Could that happen? It has happened in history. Okay, so do we want to see that happen again? Absolutely not. This is why we're raising the alarm right now. So it's a paradox, Mike. It's a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on then. And weather modification. We're sticking to the United States for a second. I'm sure many people have heard by now that legislation that the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis supported to crack down on suspected weather modification in Florida, including activity related to so-called chemtrails, is now cleared for his signature. And there's his tweet. I support the bill by Senator Ilia Garcia, USA, to ban geoengineering and weather modification. So this was resulted in a brief but a pretty heated discussion on the Florida House floor. Eventually, the vote was 82 to 28 in favor, which makes unauthorized cloud seeding and other activities similar to that a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a significant fine of up to $100,000. Now, each individual infraction would count as a separate violation, and that would potentially lead to much longer and much higher penalties, either longer time in prison or bigger fines. And beginning on the 1st of October this year, anybody that's operating a publicly owned airport has to submit monthly reports to the Florida Department of Transport on any aircraft equipped to disperse substances with climate-altering capabilities. And that, as I say, includes cloud seeding. And any airport failing to do so would lose state funding. So that's quite a development. Florida becomes the second state in the United States to implement such a ban. Utah is the leading state. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, from a state-by-state basis, certainly this is going to have a different meaning, obviously, in the agricultural states and what they call the flyover states. Cloud seeding has been a long-running process in terms of making it rain during periods of drought and so forth. But it's also gone horribly wrong in places like California as well, as we've seen in recent years. So again, the United States is a big country, and each state has potentially a different agenda there. Certainly, there's a lot of people that are concerned with chemtrails, contrails, whatever, lines in the sky, whatever you want to call them. So is that going to have something to do with it? Certainly. I think the dimming the sun story that came out of the UK recently has also prompted some big discussions and backlash on this issue.
And that's what's needed, more discussion. So, Mark, let me welcome you to this. Now, the reports I saw said that Utah was the first state to ban geoengineering, but they clearly still continuing with cloud seeding.
Oh, absolutely. This is a complex issue. And the word you used there, Mike, was a very key word, unauthorized. And I'm doing an overview of this issue, kind of bearing down on it with the intent of talking to people very soon. I have one appointment for Monday that are in the cloud seeding business, and to talk to some local meteorologists and get this to be a more public discussion, because a lot of people, even though cloud seeding is open in plain sight, yet a lot of people don't realize much, if anything, about it in terms of its existence or the nature of it. Anyway, ironically, Utah, one of the two states you just named, its cloud seeding program, according to a very recent article by KUER, is the envy of the drought-weary West. And that was published April 24, so very recently. And we'll move on with a little bit of description about this. Utah is home to the nation's largest cloud seeding program, the Crossroads Technologies Path Recording Report. States become a bound for cloud in the West. Get this, this article couldn't even go 2 paragraphs without saying this. With water managers, private sector investors, and conspiracy theorists, there they are, keeping a close eye on their progress. Advocates are saying the technology works. They just need to know to what degree. It's a practice involving millions of dollars in public funding, guys, countless snowflakes. They can also make it snow, not just rain. They're not talking about liberal snowflakes. And a string of death threats. Of course, that's the conspiracy theorists, allegedly. And the technology, this news outlet is saying, is strikingly uncomplicated, which is true. The same article refers to a Jared Smith. He lives near Ogden, Utah. And all this involves is a solar charged battery, a tank of non-toxic silver iodide, that's the main cloud seeding substance, a tank of propane, some fuels, and he works for Salt Lake City-based North American Weather Consultants. And get this, they operate 200 of these setups across Utah. So to ban this in Utah altogether would be a difficult thing. And that's the
Right, Mark. Sorry, Mark. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to interrupt there because this connection is extremely bad. Could you try rejoining the connection, please? And let's see if we can get this to work. We may have to. We'll give Mark a second to come back. We may have to move on and restart it.
We can circle back to the story.
Circle back to the story. Yeah. Okay. Let's just do that. And let's see. Where does that take us? Well, that takes us to the ad break. So let's just say if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, please go to support.ukcolumn.org, and there are options to help us out there. You can make a donation. You can join us as a member. And of course, if you join us as a member, that gets you access to UK Column News Extra, forums, and so on. Another way to support us is through the UK Column shop. And if you buy something using the link on this page from clivetocarl.com, that helps us as well. But if you can't do any of that, please do at least share the material you find on the UK Column website. We've got some share links for you to use there. And that helps us greatly because we are heavily censored, as everybody knows. And we need you to be the algorithm for us. It's the Cheltenham t-shirts still available. If you want to get access to the live stream, that's still available on the UK Column shop as well. So please do have a look at that if you haven't seen that yet. Yesterday's interview between Charles and Germ Warfare is on the website if you'd like to have a look at that. And don't forget that Germ will be running a series of podcasts on the UK Column beginning at 7 p.m. on Monday. So more details to come, but do join us at 7 p.m. on Monday for that as well. Another reminder of Stand in the Light that is taking place in Cumbria on bank holiday weekend later in May, 23rd to 26th of May. Details on screen. The details will be in the show notes. So please do join us for that if you possibly can. Okay, let's move on then to Yemen. And well, earlier this week, UK forces participated in a joint operation with US forces against the so-called Houthi military target, a so-called Houthi military target in Yemen. The Ministry of Defence says that the action was in line with long-standing policy of the UK government following the Houthis initiating their campaign of attacks in November 2023, which the Ministry of Defence maintains threatens freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. And that brings us back to the issue with what Israel's just done. But anyway, careful intelligence analysis, according to the Ministry of Defence, has identified or did identify a cluster of buildings used by the Houthis to manufacture drones of the type used to attack ships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. And this was located 15 miles south of Sana'a. And so the Royal Air Force Typhoons, with air refueling support from Voyager tankers, engaged a number of these buildings. This is their words, using paveway for precision-guided bombs. And this was only done, though, they say, once very careful planning had been completed to minimize risks to civilians or non-military infrastructure. And as a further precaution, this strike was conducted after dark, when they say the likelihood of any civilians being in the area was reduced further. Do you buy that?
Who knows?
Who knows? Well, look, we have to say that, well, I'm going to say that Mr. Healy was making a comment in the House of Commons saying that make no mistake, he said the Houthis act as an agent of instability across the region. That was his claim. They continue to receive backing from Iran, and get this, he couldn't leave Russia out. And even Russia has attempted to support the Houthi operations.
Attempted to support.
Attempted, yes.
Oof, that's dangerous.
So he said that the aggression in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden is yet another example of how our adversaries are increasingly working together against our interests. This against the interests of the British government, of course.
So it justifies killing civilians, even if we're taking all measures to, reduce the risk of civilian casualties. But even if you kill one, what's the justification for that? That the Yemenis violated your interests?
Yes.
But they haven't actually attacked anything in your country? None of your people, not even your military assets that are flying by, thumbing their noses at the Yemenis.
Right.
None of that. So there's no expeditionary element to the Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis. There's nothing.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's just threats, and no mention of why the Yemenis are interdicting Israeli ships.
Right.
Why are they can we get any mention of that from any of the politicians?
No.
Was that verboten? Are we allowed to talk about that?
Apparently not.
Okay.
But anyway, this is from your YouTube or your Twitter feed. This is allegedly the aftermath of what happened.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think this is from an earlier airstrike. I'm not sure, but anyway, the context that the journalists that we follow in Yemen are basically saying that this targeting is just basically ad hoc, that their intelligence isn't really very much to speak of, and its civilians are being killed in Yemen, and the Yemenis continue to strike back at U.S. military, and that's the amazing part. Because the strikes against U.S. aircraft, the number of downed U.S. drones, combat drones, and lost aircraft continues to mount. And this is the poorest country in the world, Yemen.
Right.
How's this happening?
Good
Interesting.
Question. But it's not going altogether perfectly for the United States in the area, is it?
Not even close. Not even close. So bring this up on screen here, and we're not picking the Guardian for any particular reason. We thought it had a better photograph, but other mainstream media outlets are reporting on this right now. A fighter jet rolled off the aircraft carrier. I believe this is the USS Harry Truman, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Harry S. Truman, and to swerve to avoid a Houthi missile. Can you believe this? So initially they made up a fake story and put it out. The government, U.S. government, the Pete Hegseth put out a fake, or the media put out a fake story that somehow this was just a routine sort of accident. No, it wasn't. Now we find out U.S. sailors had to leap for their lives after an FA-18 fighter, the Super Hornet, fell off the Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier, reportedly making, quote, evasive maneuvers to avoid a Houthi missile in the Red Sea on Monday. And it goes on. And then the jet, along with the vessel towing it, rolled right out of the hangar and into the Red Sea, said a U.S. Navy spokesperson here. So what's going on there? And obviously this is a nightmare for Trump's embattled defense secretary. There he is, Pete Hegseth, the crusader himself. And let's look at so Pete Hegseth's follow-up to this disaster on Monday is this: a message to Iran. We see your lethal support for the Houthis. We know exactly what you're doing. You know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You will pay the consequence at the time of our place and choosing. So again, the U.S. has picked this fight with the Yemenis, and Pete Hegseth is, saber rattling while he's bombing them. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. So I think Pete Hegseth is probably going to get fired pretty soon, because this is very irrational behavior. Plus the Signalgate scandal. Plus this guy isn't even qualified to head the U.S. military. He was a Fox News weekend host who was flogging ghostwriter books just a few months ago, and suddenly he's the head of $1.2 trillion Pentagon. Pretty amazing. But that's life in reality TV, Mike.
Yes, indeed it is. Mark, let's come back to you then. Sorry for the problems. And let's come back onto the issue of cloud seeding.
Yes, apologies. I tried a different kind of hookup. It should be a lot better. Let me know. Anyway, I was talking about the North American Weather Consultants, and they've been at this for 70 years, primarily in Utah, where we're hearing there might be some kind of alleged ban. And they say in their slogan, climate and weather experts, we make it rain, literally, as they pronounce. And we'll continue dissecting this issue to get to kind of a broader perspective on it. This is also from the NAWC, Environmentally Responsible Rainfall and Snowfall Augmentation. They began performing their cloud seeding in California in 1952, so it's not just Utah. Their operations have grown immensely, and now their programs through that outfit are California, Utah, and into Colorado. And they customize the programs, they say, according to farmers' needs. And there's a lot of regeneration of aquifers. And there's a bit of a correction on this one. I wanted to show this because a few episodes back of my reports, I said this was from a National Weather Modification Association website. Actually, this is from the Texas licensing body that licenses cloud seeding programs, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And they list, just in Texas alone, harvesting the skies. Get the language. They harvest the skies, rain enhancement operations. There's the West Texas, South Texas, Panhandle, Trans-Pecos, and Rolling Plains weather modification associations, or their groundwater conservation districts, or things like that. So it's major here in Texas. And just to get an idea of the scale and timeframes on this, we'll continue to outline it. Just as a for instance, there's a National Weather Modification Association enabling persons, political entities, and other organizations to make informed decisions about the application of weather mod to provide for adequate water supplies, they're saying, and reduced natural weather hazards. So they're starting to talk more about wildfires, how they might mitigate against that, although it's not generally known by the public. This is a little more on the South Texas weather mod, the one that's closest to me. It's near San Antonio. They're in their 25th year. They work with the Edwards Aquifer Authority, and they've expanded to about 2.2 million acres to nearly 6 million acres in their target area, the second largest in Texas. So again, these are not small operations. Over in West Texas, it's in San Angelo. This project's in its 27th year. 6.4 million acres in West Central Texas is their target area. And so it's not like they're just crop dusters in limited areas. And these are a couple of others. The Panhandle Groundwater Conservation District covers 4.1 million acres, and the Trans-Pecos Weather Mod Association covers 5.1 million acres. Very, very large scale operations. And this is a map worth showing. This is from California, the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority. I've got a call into them. I'm hoping to talk to them next week, along with one Texas appointment that I do have. And on the map to the left, it shows where this is at in California, where they've had some wildfire activity. And the main map to the right there is a close-up. And these are the member agencies that make up that watershed. And the cloud seeding encompasses that entire area comprised of those member agencies. Again, to give you an idea of the scale and scope of these things. And lastly, this is a very important point. Meanwhile, we've had, wildfires, we've had reported water shortages, especially in California and in Australia a few years back. The water bottlers at Nestle that bottle water and the Coca-Cola bottlers that also use huge amounts of groundwater pretty much go on unabated, no matter what's going on. These news clips are a little bit old, but the issues haven't really changed. Lawmakers in the above headline opened the groundwater fight against bottled water companies. That's in Washington State, going back a few years. And the other headline it talks about primarily in Michigan why Nestle pays next to nothing for hammering the aquifers to bottle water and sell it back to us. And that's a huge issue because much of the cloud seeding, at least a good part of it, is to regenerate the aquifers. But between fish farms, fish hatcheries, which are huge water users, water in, water out, not much recycling, and your water and your soft drink bottlers, the aquifers are getting hammered around the clock every day, 365, 24/7. So if there was a little bit more regulation of those that hammer those aquifers, you might not need as much cloud seeding to regenerate them. And of course, cloud seeding itself is a very off-the-shelf technology. There are many other kinds of geoengineering that are a little bit more illicit in their nature. The NOAA organization lists 9 or 10 of them that you'll be fined $10,000 for if you engage in those other 9 or 10 types of geoengineering that are not cloud seeding. So that's a tacit admission by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that there are 10 or 11 different kinds of weather mod, not just cloud seeding. So cloud seeding might be seen as the most useful, if it's done right, among those different techniques to mitigate against wildfires before they happen, or maybe dampen them a bit after they start, although the conditions have to be right for cloud seeding and it has to be done correctly. So it's an issue that I'm trying to get to the bottom of, so realistic conversations and more general public knowledge can be realized, and then we can have a more intelligent discussion about the future of cloud seeding and then the broader issue of geoengineering, so more people know about these matters. That's the key. So for now, and I have something in extra that's very humorous, a humorous outtake on this issue that we'll show. So back to you guys.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, now, Patrick, let's come back then to Ukraine. And of course, the deal was signed on minerals at last. What do we need to know about it?
Well, there's a lot in there, a lot of specifics, a lot of vague things as well. We did put a sort of breakdown of this up at 21stcenturywire.com. Ukraine signs mineral deal with the U.S. What you need to know. The things that jumped out at me on this are, the fact that the United States has basically changed their arrangement now to an official pay to protect sort of arrangement with Ukraine. So, I mean, this is not a good deal for Ukraine. When they accepted all this aid 3 years ago from the U.S. and all these countries, they weren't expecting they would have to basically mortgage their whole future and all of their natural resources to pay for it when a new president came in. And this is exactly what's happened. So this can go two ways. But I'll show you some of those angles in a moment. But this is interesting here at Zero Hedge. Dmitry Medvedev, who is very hawkish, potentially the next Russian president. I'm not sure if that'll happen. But anyway, former Russian president. He's basically saying Trump has broken the Zelensky regime through this deal. And so it means that the United States, when they give aid to Ukraine, they then can get a deposit into their sort of special U.S. fund, basically. So Trump wants to be paid back with minerals and all natural resources, everything, oil, gas, lithium, everything is up for grabs. So the problem here is that the future Ukrainian government could come in, another president, and could say that Zelensky was out of mandate, he was illegitimate, he signed this terrible deal. You could do a Trump. The next Ukrainian government could pull a Trump. It was a terrible deal. They signed it with Trump. It was a terrible deal. And tear it up, and they would have every right to do that. Okay? And Russia also is kind of laughing because they don't see Zelensky as a legitimate head of state or an heir apparent or party to any meaningful negotiations. And yet Trump has signed this deal, which provides supposedly protection guarantees for Ukraine and also promises reparations to Ukraine. Where are those reparations coming from? Perhaps from the frozen Russian assets that are in Euroclear, $350 billion. Trump's definitely using that as a bargaining tool with Moscow, but Moscow is not going to bite at all on that. So that's where things are. The other thing that's interesting about this is this angle here, and this is what. By the way, here's Michael Tracy up on screen. He's basically saying the whole idea was that U.S. would not become super engaged and meshed with Ukraine, but Trump has basically created a deal that makes them permanently enmeshed with Ukraine. So good point here from American journalist
So the
Michael
United
Tracy.
States got permanent enmeshment. We've only got 100 years to worry about.
That's the problem. There's a little competition here, Mike, because didn't Keir Starmer just sign this to great fanfare, the 100-year partnership with Ukraine? Well, Donald Trump's come in and gazumped the British. That's what it looks like anyway. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we can see there's some competition there. So Starmer got the okay from Biden to do this before Trump was inaugurated. This was the middle of January that ball was rolling. All of a sudden, Trump's come in and now put his marker down on all of Ukraine, basically, or whatever's left. All the high-performing assets, Mike, are in the eastern part of the country. And the other thing, and the reason we had the original image, you saw BlackRock on Zelensky's jumper there, that's kind of what this is. It's basically Trump making it official that they're going to basically use Ukrainian resources as collateral for future loans and financial aid to Ukraine. That's what BlackRock was doing. This is what George Soros and these huge hedge funds and private equity firms are doing, is basically collateralizing all their resources in exchange for loans and debt, basically. So Trump's just gone and made it official. So, and it could end up in the hands of BlackRock quite easily, and probably will, in fact. But the United States somehow is going to get a skim. They're going to get a cut from it. So this is like crazy mafia tactics. And Russia's just sitting back saying, go ahead, carry on. This isn't advancing our peace negotiations one bit. So that's the irony of it all.
Okay, well, let's come back to the UK then. And, well, apparently Britain is full of fraudsters. That seems to be the position of the British government at the moment. So the Department for Work and Pensions has launched what it describes as a new souped up powers to recover money directly from bank accounts of fraudsters. Following the third reading of the Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill. And the claim is that the bill is designed to combat multi-billion-pound benefit fraud in the UK. It proposes measures that will enable the DWP to reclaim funds directly from bank accounts of those convicted of fraud. It would also allow the DWP to obtain bank statements from individuals who are believed to have the means to repay welfare debts but are refusing to do so. We'll talk about why people might be refusing to do so in a second, but the courts may also have the power to suspend driving license of people that are described as fraudsters upon application by the DWP if they owe more than £1,000 in welfare debts and have consistently ignored repayment requests. And the Starmer regime is claiming that this bill will save the taxpayer £1.5 billion over the next 5 years. And they say it's part of a wider plan to set out in the autumn budget and spring statement to save £9.6 billion by 2030. But that doesn't seem like much of a return because the government claims this in their press release, and I'll quote this. The new legislation comes as the government is dealing with a broken welfare system that it inherited with out-of-control levels of fraud and error, costing the taxpayer around £10 billion a year, with a total of £35 billion of taxpayers' money incorrectly paid to those not entitled to the money since the pandemic. So £35 billion, but they're going to aim to get £1.5 billion back over the next 5 years. So there's something else going on here. This isn't.
I know what's going on.
Well, yeah, indeed. So they're taking another massive chunk out of personal privacy in order to recover a fraction of the alleged fraud that's taking place, and by giving access to the DWP to people's bank accounts. I certainly question the fraud allegation in any case because error arising out of an over-complex system and civil servant incompetence is much more.
It happens a lot,
yes,
where people are getting payments and then find out later, and then the government says, well, we've overpaid you and you need to pay it all back.
By which time you spent the money, you're on benefits already. Where are you supposed to get the money to pay it back?
Most of these people are in overdraft or they're on a day-to-day hand-to-mouth basis. So the idea that you're suspending their driving license, what if they drive a van, or what if they need to drive to go to work? They're not going to be able to repay their debt.
Right.
But let me quickly, Mike, on this one. The CBDC, one of the features of the central bank digital currency is called the clawback.
Right.
Okay. What this looks like it is potentially a Trojan horse to provide the legislative legitimacy for a practice in the future with CBDCs that will be hugely controversial.
Well, it does that, but it just normalizes the thing in people's minds as well. But look, in the meantime, another big chunk of interference in personal liberty comes with the announcement by Rachel Reeves that cryptocurrencies will be regulated in the UK, and this is in order, they say, to support innovation while cracking down on fraudsters, right? Firms, this is what they're saying, firms offering services for crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum will be subject to new clear rules, boosting investor confidence and driving growth through the plan for change. That should make us all feel very comfortable. So let's have a listen briefly to what she had to say at a fintech conference a couple of days ago.
That's why I'm delighted that we are today publishing draft legislation for the UK's comprehensive regulatory regime for crypto assets, engaging with all of you to ensure that the final legislation, planned for later this year, delivers for government and, most importantly, for the industry, and makes the UK a great place for digital asset companies to invest and innovate. For the UK...
Now, she went on to talk about the fact that the regulator needs to enable this, and this is very much the model, the regulatory model that's rolling out in the UK at the moment. MHRA does this as well. Ofcom's doing this too. You create regulations which enable the corporates to continue to behave very well. In the meantime, it absolutely restricts the activities of individuals. So look, this is about tax. It's about making sure that no one can make a capital gain on a crypto asset without HMRC knowing about it. Because what is the government actually doing about real fraud in the UK? Absolutely nothing. And just to give one example, the UK has currently the highest telephone fraud levels in Europe, with 45 million people targeted by scam calls and texts, hundreds of millions of pounds stolen from vulnerable people each year, so-called phishing scams, technical support scams, investment scams, refund scams, lottery and prize scams. This is big business, and UK Gov and Ofcom are doing nothing about it. And in fact, in 2023, CFAS, a fraud prevention NGO, ran a survey which indicated that £7.5 billion is stolen globally, and that 1 in 10 Britons fall victim to these scams in any particular 12-month period. This is something that the UK government does nothing about. In the meantime, they're busy increasing regulation in certain areas while ignoring the bulk of the fraud that takes place in this country.
Yeah, not to mention the money that's being shipped to Ukraine, but we won't talk about that because that's just a drop in the bucket, isn't it?
Precisely. Mark, back to you then. And what's the World Council for Health been up to?
This is, of course, a follow-up to the plug and advance notice that UK Column gave on this. And the World Council for Health, of course, has a very aggressive outlook to generate more opposition to the pandemic treaty. And they gave a program the 28th of April that I watched in real time. Who Said Yes? It was called the Pandemic Treaty Without Public Consent. James Roguski, one of the 8 presenters. So it was quite an interesting program, and we'll move through this fairly briskly. There was also the Pan American Health Organization alongside the WHO, and this was shown. This is a screenshot from that World Council for Health presentation, Guide for WHO Collaborating Centers. This is a very big issue when it comes to sovereignty, because a lot of people have said, well, the pandemic treaty will undermine national sovereignty, and so on and so forth. And the U.S. technically backed out of the WHO. But here's the rub. These collaborating centers could completely nullify the fact that the U.S. backed out of the WHO. And we'll show this listing here to get an idea of the numbers. The World Council for Health, another screenshot from the program, listed some of the collaborating centers by number. The U.S. has about 72 of them, China 60, India 59, the UK 50 of them, Australia 43, Japan 33, and Canada 26. What are collaborating centers? They're any university or government outlet in the U.S. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is a collaborating center. So health institutions, universities, organizations, and agencies like the CDC are among these collaborating centers. Now, the WHO guide for those collaborating centers lists some very interesting things, as we'll show here. The entities collaborating with WHO are obliged to follow a WHO-determined authorized work plan. Another one, the product, including intellectual property, the products involved belong to the WHO, according to the presentation. There's a non-compete clause that must be signed and no option to withdraw, even though it's time limited in years. And this is from a Dr. Jean Rungby from the Danish Health Authority, asking the question, do the Danish Health Authority, does that authority obey orders from the WHO, or shouldn't they? And the last bullet point on this 4-point thing is all legal responsibility rests with the institution. That's the collaborating center, not the WHO, including any injuries to human test subjects. Get that? Very interesting. Now, Dr. Tess Lowry was another one of the listed participants, and she had a action item or research item that sounds very helpful. What are WHO collaborating centers doing in your country? Modeling new pandemics, experimenting with pathogens, developing bioweapons as vaccines, she says, gathering data and surveilling you. Isn't it time to find out what WHO's doing in your neighborhood, what the WHO is doing in your neighborhood? And what she recommends is search the WHO Collaborating Centers directory. We can provide that website link on the show notes. And that Collaborating Centers directory from the WHO is a comprehensive list of all the WHO collaborating centers, and it's publicly accessible. So anybody in the UK, the US, all around the world can go to that directory and find out what government agencies and universities and private institutions are part of these collaborating centers in concert with the WHO. It's something anyone can look up. Meanwhile, Roguski, for his part, presented the Repeal the PrEP Act. Let's go ahead and show that. Nice big bold letters there, Repeal the PrEP Act. And that, of course, is an act on the books that provides legal immunity from lawsuits and liability to those who manufactured, distributed, and administered remdesivir and the COVID-19 so-called vaccines. And Roguski is advocating the PrEP Act must be repealed. And the other participants, of course, at the program echoed that. And this is an interesting wording, you might say, from the Repeal the PrEP Act promo online at Roguski's Substack blog. Make murder a crime again. Get that. Make murder a crime again. Put the PrEP Act in the trash. RepealThePrEPAct.com. That's the website through which anyone can get involved. And this last item, sign the petition. I believe this is the last item, also from Roguski, and others commented on it. If you live in the U.S., complete the form below to add your name to a letter to Congress demanding the repeal of the PrEP Act. Your name will be listed, but no personal information will be there. If you have any questions, there's an email there, james.roguski@gmail.com, or you can text or call him. It's best to text first. And he doesn't mind giving out this number, of course, 310-619-3055 in Los Angeles, California. And there's websites there we'll put in the show notes where you can get involved if you're in the U.S., or you can get involved with this petition even if you don't live in the U.S. So there was a lot of emphasis, guys, on taking action before the World Health Assembly convenes to try and finalize the treaty May 19 through 27 in Geneva. So some very important matters discussed there, some very urgent matters. So that's our follow-up for now.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Patrick, let's come back to you then, and we're going to finish with something that Alex Jones is putting out.
Well, yeah, this is a story that was put out a few days ago. I first saw it on Tommy Robinson's Twitter account on April 27th. And the story was here, and we're putting this up on screen. So Alex Jones had posted this, and basically we'll let this roll. Those are the community notes, by the way, of which there are massive community notes correcting this. The claim by Alex Jones and others like Tommy Robinson, but Alex was specific. He said that Pakistani immigrants burned down a Christian church in Wales. Okay, big accusation. So you expect there'll be some receipts for that. And he's saying this a church in Wales was set fire by two Pakistani, quote, invaders. Okay. Now, when you actually look at the media reporting on this, we find out that this was an abandoned church, and that the arsonists who are being held or arrested by the police are two, native white Welsh youths, okay, teenagers, not Pakistani. So what this is, I can't imagine with no basis whatsoever that you would do something like this. It got around 2 million views. Robinson's got 1 point something million, and various and sundry other kind of, I don't know what to call them, these types of accounts on X, and other social media platforms got millions of views on the aggregate. This story went viral, Mike. This story went viral. And I really have to say this is incitement, really, because there's no journalistic merit to any of this. It's just a made-up story that has an evocative anti-immigrant and clash of civilizations narrative, Christian versus Muslim. Clearly, that's the intention of this.
Right.
Now, this morning, after being up 3 days, we looked at Alex's account this morning, and this tweet that we have, we'll bring this back up on screen, is it's off. It's been deleted. Okay. Now, I contacted InfoWars or a representative there and just pointed this out. You guys can't run this. It's not true. Look at the community notes under your own tweet. Nobody was either checking it or they didn't want to take it down. Eventually they have. So to their credit, they took it down. But Tommy Robinson's still running with this story, as are all of his acolytes. I didn't check Elon Musk's account, but this is the type of thing that Elon Musk and Peter Sweden would tweet as well. Whether it's true or not, they really couldn't care less. But we'll just bring, just so people can read this clearly, bring this up on screen. Breaking news. A church in Wales was set fire by 2 Pakistani invaders. Christianity is under a massive attack in the UK. If you complain to the thought police, they will arrest you. This is just insane that somebody from the United States has made this go viral to as a British audience as well as a European audience and the U.S. audience. I personally find this to be very disturbing because it's totally fake. That's the problem with it. And I know in the alternative media community, people don't like criticizing certain people because they see them as truth heroes. But you have to call this out, because when you have people, there's actual violence taking place on streets in this country and other countries. And if we're putting out a fake story that has no basis in reality, that ends up in a violent clash based on religious differences or something like that, then whoever's putting that story out is partially responsible for that. It has real world implications.
Not just the person putting the story out, everybody that shared the thing. And the thing about this is, aside from the point about the violence is absolutely, and the clash of civilizations, absolutely important. The other point about this is every time we share something which is fake, we are giving justification to Ofcom, to the censorship regime, to the censorship industrial complex, the fact checkers, all the people that are censoring organizations like us. We're giving them justification for what they're doing. This has to stop.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Mike, that you just made the most important point of this, that these whale accounts, they have millions of followers. They have a lot of power, okay? But when they put fake stories that is religious or racial incitement stories, and Elon Musk himself does this, okay, then the result is that it's low-hanging fruit for the establishment, the fascist governments that we're trying to keep at bay with censorship. It gives them such an easy entree to want to regulate these platforms. So it's very irresponsible for any content creator or alternative media outlet to put out patent lies like this that have huge implications. And it's just like throwing red meat to the establishment on this. I cannot stress how bad this type of behavior is. And people, I know a lot of people, because if it fits your emotional state, when you see something like this, you want to retweet and share it. Everyone's done it in their life, okay? But try to think, and check, is there any basis to this? Look at the community notes on X. Under Alex's tweet, there are community notes panning him. It's fake. No, here's the real story from the Welsh local news. Nobody's listening or looking at any of that. They're just retweeting and sharing it and then getting angry in the comments saying, we need to stop these Muslims from coming in, these invaders coming in our country. This is kind of the Tommy Robinson narrative. He said that church has stood since 1033 or whatever he's saying, like this was some sort of reverse crusade. But the story itself is fake. And then people will say, well, Pat, are you saying there's not an immigration problem? I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the specific story. It's incumbent on media, journalists, outlets, independent media, mainstream media. You criticize the mainstream media all day long. Oh, the BBC's lying. What happens when the alternative independent media lies? And what happens if that ends up becoming some kind of a violent incident somewhere down the butterfly effect chain? Listen, you got to have some accountability for stuff like that. That's all we're saying. Everyone should try a little bit harder and think a little bit more before they, share certain things. And then, contact these media outlets directly. That's what we normally do. And sometimes we get results. And not with the mainstream normally, but sometimes we do.
Yeah.
So,
well, yes. Okay, look, we got to leave it there for today. We're a little bit over time. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mark. We'll be back in a few minutes, 5 minutes or so. If you're on the live stream, if you're a UK Column member for some news extra, do join us for that. Otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll see you as usual on Monday, 1 p.m. See you then. Bye-bye.